Welcome to the SpiritWoke Podcast, podcasting from the beautiful city of Stillwater, the birthplace of Minnesota. Are you going through a spiritual awakening? Do you wish to learn more about continued spiritual growth and want to meet others who are on a similar journey? We hope that this podcast and its community can be a meaningful resource for you. The SpiritWoke Podcast welcomes special guests from around the globe who share personal stories of their awakening journey, along with details of spiritual abilities they've developed along the way. So buckle up and get ready for this exciting episode. And now, here's your host, Adam Dins.
Friends, welcome back to the SpiritWoke Podcast. Today we're joined by Jennie McDaniel and Mandee Elam to discuss past and parallel lives, as well as reincarnation. But before we get started, allow me to do a brief introduction. Jennie's a multifaceted healer. Her most used modalities include massage therapy, shamanic journeys, energy work, past life regressions, karmic healing, and channeling non-physical entities. She has more than 16 years experience and has done over 15,000 healings in her career. Jennie enjoys the time she spends recording live podcasts on her podcast network, Heart Over Ego Radio. Now, Mandee Elam has over 10 years of experience in the healing arts as a spiritual advisor and empowerment coach. Mandee has helped countless clients overcome fear, anxiety, guilt, shame, sadness, and grief. She has helped them to find peace, self-love, purpose, and joy through her teachings. Mandee works with many survivors of trauma, and Mandee also works closely with the angelic realm and the divine feminine consciousness. She can deliver messages from your angels to help you on your path of spiritual growth, and she is always willing to talk. So with that being said, Jennie, Mandee, welcome back, or welcome to the SpiritWoke Podcast.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, Adam. I love your energy, and I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. Me too. I am honored to hold space with you both tonight.
Yeah, it's great. It's so great to have you back. I know I goofed and said welcome back, and it's because we talk so often that it feels like you've been on the podcast before, even though you haven't. So, but maybe in a past life or a parallel life, you've been on this podcast.
Now you're onto something.
Yeah, that's what it was. I was remembering a past life experience. So that was, there you go.
You came on our show too. So it feels like we have connected already. So it does feel like a welcome back.
It sure does. It absolutely does. And that's a great feeling to have. So it's always great to hold space with you both. And so I'm really excited about this conversation tonight because, one of my personal favorite topics is past lives. And I know we're going to talk about parallel lives because that's something too that, I haven't been as aware of parallel lives as long as I have past lives, but it's kind of mind-blowing to think about. And then reincarnation. I know there are people who are listening who may be familiar with reincarnation or may believe it, may not believe it, not really sure what to believe. So I'm really excited to talk about all these things tonight with both of you and whatever else that spirit decides to bring up during this conversation.
Yay. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Well, let's get started. Mandee, Jennie, would you tell our listeners about your awakening experience? Like what sparked it? What caused it to take off?
Well, I'm 41 years old now, and it started when I was around 8. I was watching Oprah Winfrey, and she was interviewing a gentleman that swore up and down, back and forth, that he had lived and died in our American Civil War in a past life. And Oprah, I just love Oprah, but back in the day, she was pretty controversial, and I guess she can still be today. But this was before the web. This was like 1986 or 87, and he just knew way too much information that wasn't available to the public about particular parts of the Civil War and certain groups of the Civil War. So it flipped my little 8-year-old head back. I just opened up to that like nobody's business. It ringed more true to me than anything has even to date. So I wasn't raised with religion, so it didn't bounce off like, oh, that can't be true. And I wasn't raised with a lot of structure in that space, so the sky was the limit. So when I heard that this gentleman had lived and died, or so he thought, in our American Civil War, and he had a birthmark on his head to prove where he had been shot, so he said. It just opened so much up to me, and I was able to download, I like to say, some memories about my past life deaths, or some ways I had died in parallel or past lives. We'll get into that in a second. But the memories were that I had been burnt. So I thought as an 8-year-old that I had been burnt in a house fire of some sort. So I was like, ooh, that's a terrible way to die. And I wasn't scared with these images. It was just understanding or knowing. And then I had a recollection of a past life that I had in this lifetime carried over some fear with. So at 8 years old, if I had a headache or a fever, my mom would crush my children's Tylenol up in a spoon with water and feed it to me that way. My younger brother and sister, 4 and 5 years younger, no problem swallowing pills. I thought this was odd because I was the older sister, and why do I have to have stuff crushed up? Well, it became aware to me in that sitting when I was 8 years old that I had died by taking pills. My 8-year-old had comprehended choking on them. Later on in life, I realized I had committed suicide by taking pills. So that was my first awareness, which was pretty intense. And I lived a pretty normal childhood for the most part after that, beyond being interested in ghost stories and what have you. And then the roof came off again when I was about 24 and entered massage therapy school. So that's the beginning of it.
Wow, that's really cool. So 8 years old, I can't even imagine what it's like at 8 years old to sort of like have a moment where all of a sudden just the space of or the thought of reincarnation or past lives comes into your head. You know, it's like I could barely wrap my head around the cartoons I was watching at 8 years old, let alone, you know, holy moly, I lived a past life? Like it just so powerful.
Yeah, you know, I feel like it just rang so true to me that it was just my first introduction to my ultimate truth. So at 8 years old, the typical 8-year-old does have an idea of who Jesus is and God, if they're a religious family. So in my mind, it was kind of a stretch, but in reality, at 8 years old, you start to develop parts of your brain that help you understand things more clearly. I don't know if it's a cognitive development. I'm not skilled in that forte, but I do know that some developments happen. So it does seem odd, but really it seems so natural and so normal, and it didn't upset me or scare me. It, in fact, just had me more curious than ever before. And then I moved into the older I got, the more I could read other people's past lives.
Okay, last question about this before we get to Mandee's story. But did you tell your parents when you had this sort of epiphany? Did you share it with your family at all?
I didn't, and it wasn't like I better keep it secret kind of energy. It wasn't that at all. I just think that it was so natural and so normal of a thought, and it was so harmless and kind of cool that it didn't cross my mind to tell my parents. Plus, I didn't have the words to describe it to them. Yeah.
I can't even imagine. Like, what would you even say, you know?
Yeah, my parents weren't religious, but they would have been like, what, kid? You know?
Yeah. Amazing. Mandee, would you tell our guests about your awakening experience? Please. Can't wait to hear your story.
Yeah, I would be honored to. I'm kind of similar to Jennie. Like, I didn't know I was weird or different until a little bit later on, but it started really young for me. I remember being in church when I was a kid, and like I was getting baptized, actually. I was probably 4 years old. My mom waited till my younger brother was born and had us baptized together. And I just remember sitting on the step waiting and having this like memory, like, oh, we're here again? Okay, like I can do this. And it really reflected to my Magdalene consciousness now, but it was a really interesting experience, and I'll just never forget it. I just felt so like in the right place, but in a different place at the same time. It was like I was there to almost create a little bit of a revolution or bring truth and clarity. And I knew secrets that people were thinking about. And I just had this sense of knowing and like my purpose. And I would connect with angels and I would see them and I would talk to them. And it felt really just like friendly and comfortable. And it was pretty normal for me. And then I would get like obsessed with like, I don't know, when I was 6, I think my favorite movie was Dances with Wolves and Sister Act, because I had a lot of nun past lives and a lot of past lives working with the Magdalene consciousness, which for those listeners who don't know, what I feel is it's a very divine feminine consciousness. And I believe that Mary Magdalene was Jesus's lover and soulmate, and they came in and incarnated together to teach alchemy and to teach us all how to heal and raise the vibration of the planet and heal one another and, kind of maybe not get to where we've gotten to now, but that's a whole nother story. So I always had this really strong resonance with that. Then when I was in probably I don't know, I want to say 4th grade, I started talking to kids at school about my dreams. And it happened because this one kid had a nightmare and he's like, yeah, I had the worst dream last night and I was up all night and then I couldn't go back to bed. And I just went over very innocently and I was like, well, why don't you just wake yourself up? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, in your dream, why don't you just say, oh, I'm over this dream and get up and, go to the bathroom or go back to sleep. And he was like, well, I can't do that. Can you do that? And I was like, well, yeah, you can't. And then there was 10 other kids standing around and they're like, I can't do that. And so that's when I became aware of my lucid dreaming. And I used to spend a lot of time when I was young and innocent on the astral plane, learning and studying and floating around. And I always not controlled what happened in my dreams, but I got to control whether or not I was a part of it and what I felt or experienced. So that was pretty cool. And then life happens and it breaks you and shakes you. I always had a very strong intuition, but I struggled with certain things like many other empaths do. And it wasn't until I was kind of like Jennie, around 26, I want to say, 27, a little older than her. I had an experience where I was snowboarding and I went to help a young man who had fallen. And long story short, he ended up passing away in my arms. And it was even though it was scary and traumatic, it was also one of the most peaceful and beautiful experiences that I've ever felt. What happened was he had hit a lift pole head on or body on with his chest, and it caused his aorta to explode on impact. But I didn't know that at the time. And I had been a snowboard instructor most of my life, and I had been a lifeguard. So I was a good person to be the first responder there. And, and I didn't move him, but towards the end, when his breathing was getting more shallow, right before ski patrol had arrived to start doing CPR, I could start to feel his presence leave a little bit and sit with me. And then I felt it snowboard with me a little down the mountain. And then I remember they were doing CPR on him, and I ended up leaving the scene and I did everything I was supposed to do. And I got on the chairlift and I remember feeling his presence with me, almost like a warm hug behind me. And I was kind of able to see him and feel him and then watch his soul ascend up into the sun. And it dissipated and almost burst into 1,000 little sparkly lights. And it was one of the most coolest experiences I've ever felt. And I was honored to be a part of that. Then flash forward a couple of months, I was bartending in Colorado and Jennie walked in and we start chit-chatting and she does a reading on me. And we went and I had a massage with her. And one of the first energies that came through was the young man who had passed away. And she showed a symbolism of him giving me yellow roses and saying thank you and asking if I knew what she was talking about. And then I told her this story. And it's kind of that reinitiated my gifts. And ever since then, I've been reading and working with Jennie and working with amazing clients. I'd been working with clients before that. I worked with the homeless for a long time and I did a lot of social work. And bartending. You get a lot of social work in those experiences. So yeah, that's a brief glimpse into my spiritual awakening.
So I bet with your abilities when you were bartending, you probably saw some pretty crazy stuff in that bar.
Oh my gosh. I bartended for 15 years and yeah, that'll put you through the school fast. That's for sure. Yeah.
I know a different topic for a different day, but were you able to see when people would come in, were you able to see spirits that were with them or attached to them or any other cool stuff?
I mean, my gifts are a little different. I don't always see spirits. I have just a couple of times as they're transcending. I'll feel them. I'll know they're around, but I tend to connect with a soul's higher self, an angel team, to kind of make sense of what's going on now and why. So I'd see people frustrated or to see people, upset about something or going through loss or heartache and kind of know what to say or do to help them to grieve. I'd also be able to see when they were very much not in alignment with their soul path and decisions that they were making that were taking away from their energy. Or I'd be able to see like exciting things coming their way and being like, oh yeah, you're going to get like this really amazing promotion in a couple months. I just have a feeling, things like that. So it was pretty cool, but luckily I'm really protected. One of my cool gifts though is I do, and Jennie will talk a lot more about this, get sometimes a little glimpse into past lives and into past life connections, especially. So like Jennie and I have a mutual soul family member who used to come into that restaurant too. And I'd be able to see his aura and his light and understand that he was someone who I've known for many, many eons. And that I was just rekindling myself and re-meeting him in this lifetime. So it was pretty cool. I have like some skills that way, but I don't always get to see like attachments or possessions other than in the sense of maybe a relationship.
Okay. Wow.
As of now, who knows? Things change.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, everyone has their gifts and abilities, and some don't or don't have them fully developed yet. So, it just depends on as you know. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. It's we have what we have, what spirit and universe wants us to have. But the gifts you have are incredible, and for those of you listening in, I can tell you that both Jennie and Mandee are incredibly gifted, and I hope you get to meet them and talk to them and work with them at some point in your journey. So Jennie, we kind of led into this. One of your areas of specialty with your gifts is past lives, and Mandee, I know you're integrating past lives into your work, and so Jennie, I think you touched on this a little bit when you were introducing your spiritual awakening, but how did you find out that you had the ability to read past lives, and why are they so important to you? And then Jennie, after you answer this question, Mandee, would you mind following up and sharing your story?
Well, it started when I was 8 and I would watch that Oprah episode. And after that, I started noticing particular styles and hairstyles and clothes styles that people would wear, demeanors also. I would start noticing people's personalities and characteristics would weigh heavy, I'll call it, with certain decades or generational energy. So for example, when I was growing up, it was 80s and 90s. And often I would run across, for example, gentlemen that had that greaser's hairdo, like John Travolta in Grease. And I would be like, God, that's so old fashioned. That is so interesting that they carry that style through. And then noticing after I recognized that it would kind of shift my thinking, and I would instantly go into, I bet they incarnated in the 1950s, and I bet that they really liked it, and that's why they carry it through into their new lifetime. Well, I wasn't far off. It was a rudimentary way to look at it, but over time, over decades, that grew to where I started to just be able to see it without clothes and styles of hair and personality traits. I started to just sense it. So it started off with me kind of using the training wheels of styles and clothes and hair and personalities to just simply tuning in intuitively to be able to see it.
Oh, wow. So you were using some cues that kind of triggered things for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Interesting. Fascinating. And were you able to go as deep initially using those cues? Like, was it sort of like a terrible use of the word vortex, but did that like suck you in, then you were in the zone and could go as deep as you wanted in the readings?
At first, it started with just acknowledgement and recognizing. And then when I got in to be a professional healer, so in my mid to late 20s, I started to go into the zone you speak of and started to be able to read things much more clearly, partially because I was just getting more mature and I was able to slow my mind a little and describe what was going on. So not at first, but later on the zone came. Okay.
Oh, very cool. Very, very cool. Mandee, how about you? How did you find out you had this ability? And is it similar? Did you kind of have sort of like some kind of stimulus that would spark it and then it turned into more of an intuitive ability? Or love to hear your...
Yeah. Totally. First of all, I love the word vortex, especially in the spiritual realm, because it means so many things and you can dive into so many different things with that. So I wanted to say I do love and appreciate that word. But also for me, it was kind of an ancient remembering. It was kind of like I was talking about before, like my favorite movies were like weird things like Dances with Wolves and Sister Act. And then I was obsessed with like slavery, and I started watching Roots in like 3rd or 4th grade and like all kinds of stuff, because I would have these flashbacks or these really visceral feelings of living at that time, whether it was as a Native American or as a slave or, you know, as a nun. Different things would come up for me and I'd have these rememberings. And then probably when I was in about, 4th grade seems to have been a big year. Around the age of 9 seems to be a really big like spiritual year that people bring things in. But for me, one of my first most visceral experiences was in one of my dreams. I attended my own funeral, and I was like a 12-year-old young Black boy who had been, I want to say I had been shot. I couldn't tell exactly by looking at my body, but I was visiting this funeral with I want to say it was probably my guardian angel or one of my head spirit guides. I couldn't see their face. I just felt their presence next to me and kind of showing me what was going on. And it looked like an old parlor, or it looked like a parlor or something, I want to call it, or like a hangout den. And it looked like it was maybe like the late 70s, early 80s. It had these like neon pink lights around it, and my coffin had all this like white, like fluffy white insulation, but like looked kind of gold on the outside. And then there was all these people crying, and there was like gospel music playing, and it wasn't at a church. It was in this like den or parlor thing. But the women had on like really big like 70s, 80s shaped glasses, and the men had like these polyester like suits and like big black afros. And so it made me think I was kind of between like the late 70s, early 80s. And I just remember talking to my guide. I couldn't see them. So I couldn't or know their name, but I just remember them saying that was you. And I think it was my most recent incarnation before my next one, even though we'll kind of get into that. It's all kind of parallel, but they were showing me a more recent one. And so for me, that really resonated, and I clearly have never forgotten it. And it was so incredibly vivid, and I felt it, and it was like a visceral experience. And then as I was continuing on my healing journey, especially as I stepped more into my divine feminine work, I would, like Jennie, understand, like, you know, I'd have a little bit of fear of fires or things like that. And I was definitely burned at the stake and drowned and all kinds of stuff. And I was persecuted. I had a very deep persecution wound. I came in always afraid of the police. Like I was like a 4-year-old little white girl in like a pretty normal mid-class, like I would say average, like suburban kind of American community, and I'd be like in the back seat, and every time like a cop car would drive by, I would like cringe or duck or hide or be afraid. And my mom's like, why is this happening? Like, you know, we have a healthy family, and even like the police haven't come to your house. Like, I don't understand. And so it wasn't until later when I realized I had spent so many incarnations in the 60s and fighting for civil rights and things like that, that I realized that. Plus, I'd also gotten persecuted quite a few times as a witch and a healer in more of the pagan times and things. So I had a lot of past life rememberings to that. I also had a really phenomenal healing with Jennie, where I shared with her I was always afraid of something really bad happening to the people I love, friends and family, to the point where it would like, you know, make me almost controlling, like, you know, not in a bad way, but like wanting them to be safe or protected. And so Jennie was able to look into a past life of mine, and I was able to go on a journey with her and really see it, where I was like a pioneer woman and traveling across the country, and ended up in like Colorado and had a husband, and he ended up dying because we stopped there to make some money, and he was a miner, and like a boulder or something fell on him and crushed him. And it was this really traumatic thing. And I ended up like getting some money and like moving to San Francisco, and it all worked out okay. But she had to do a big healing on my heart chakra because of that. And that day, everything changed. I started to really understand like the lessons of unattachment and like understanding relationships, no matter how wonderful they are, whether it's a parent or a child or a loved one, are all temporary in their own way. And it helped me to really create peace. So the understanding of past lives gave me forgiveness and permission to continue with my soul's mission in this lifetime by releasing and alchemizing fears.
That's so cool. You know, that I have to ask you both this question. So obviously you can read other people's past lives and see into them, but given the fact that you can both see your own past lives, I mean, how much time do you spend kind of reviewing yours? Do you do it all the time? Is it sometimes? Have you seen them all? Like, how does that work? Because I know if it was me and if I had that ability, I would be all up in my past parallel lives, just kind of like reviewing them, like sitting in front of the TV.
A lot of people do that. A lot of people like to meditate and visit their Akashic records all the time and spend time with that. For me, it's been something where I get flashes of it and all of a sudden I have insight into healing, and I'm very present and very into my mission here and what I'm meant to be doing in this lifetime. So when I connect with my own past lives, it's for clarity or gumption or love or support or something to support me on this path in this lifetime that I chose to experience now. So for me, they tend to be quick flashes that I like to integrate in the work that I'm doing now. But I do have clients and I do know people who like to spend a whole lot of time up in the Akashic records and the non-physical and looking at these things. And I think it's different for everyone. You can spend as much or as little time as you want in it. What about you, Jennie?
At first I spent a lot of times hashing out why I am the way I am by viewing past lives. And I don't really look at mine so much anymore. If something comes up, I absolutely look at it. But what I've noticed when it comes up the most is when I visit new places. And by new, I mean in this lifetime. So if for example, last week I went to Portland, Oregon for the first time in this lifetime, and I was able to remember several past lives where I had lived when it was a kind of a city as it is today, as well as pioneer times I made it up to Oregon, the Oregon Trail. And so I don't visit often, but I do take a look when they pop up. I give them attention, and sometimes I'll be going through, because healing is layered. You don't really start and finish it. It's just a forever going thing. And even in the non-physical, when we go into lives between lives and go into the non-physical, we're still learning then. So it's interesting. It's all very fun to look at, but I, like Mandee, am very focused and intent on the current now. I know that the best way to say now is everything's happening at once now, meaning parallel lives and past lives. But the way that I see it in my spiritual understandings is you pick the womb you come out of and you pick the time frame continuum. So my awareness is in this time frame continuum where I have, in my past, we'll call it, have experienced past lives, but they're not in the past. They're really parallel. They're happening right now still. So that's what the beauty, amongst other things, of past life readings or healings are, is we carry through a lot of fear and stress just through karma and our cells and tissue and memories. We carry those sometimes into this current life. It's a lot of fun to look at, but I don't spend tons of time there. I'm really into the now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I can imagine for some people, if you have a certain type of personality, that you could really get, like you were mentioning, you could probably get caught up in it and spend a lot of time. And I'm speaking personally, because if I had that ability, and maybe that's why I don't, I would be all up in that.
You'd be that people. You would be all up in it, watching it like a television, like you said. It's awesome.
It would totally be the Jerry Springer version of spirituality.
I can dig. Jerry Springer was right there on with Oprah. So when I was watching Oprah in the 80s, Donahue and Jerry Springer were absolutely right there.
That's funny. I was thinking of Oprah, man. I love her. She's such a revolutionary. And one thing that's always, I watched like every episode that I could, even in college. And I just remember like my favorite thing was like, love doesn't hurt. And it helps me to really, love of course hurts in certain ways, but like true love doesn't. And I don't know, I just felt really inspired to say that right now. There's certain things, actions and reactions that can cause some hurt, but like true love makes you feel loved and safe and empowered.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
It's funny. I had I don't have the gift of reading past lives, but I did I experienced a past life regression. Probably about 6-7 months ago, under a hypnotist that was trained under Dr. Michael Newton, and it was such a life-changing event for me because up to that point I had listened to a lot of audiobooks on my way. I always lament my hour-long commute into work, but how it does give me time to listen to really smart and talented people and learn about all kinds of different things. And so I'd learned a lot about past lives, but it was in reincarnation, but it was such a paradigm shift for me that, while it was interesting and I kind of believed in it until I went through this regression, it was more of maybe a wanting to believe versus like oh my God, I know that this is real now. And this past weekend, do you both have Insight Timer by chance?
What is it?
No.
So Insight Timer is a phenomenal app. You can get it on iPhone or Android. And what's cool about it, it's a meditation app, and it's $60 for the year. You get 2 weeks. I'm giving it a free plug. So by no means is a SpiritWoke podcast have any kind of relationship with the Insight Timer app. We don't receive any money from them. This is a pure, honest to God testimony. But 2 weeks free, and then it's $60 for the year, and you can find any kind of meditation you want on it, and it's whether it's music or guided or anything. But I found this guided past life regression from someone who studied with Dr. Brian Weiss, and it was really beautiful. It was about an hour long. My only gripe with it is that, to get you into the regress state, it took like 35 minutes, and then you had like 15 minutes of the past life. And so it was really fast. And so, but it was so like, even just doing it on my own, under the guided, with a guided app, it was so phenomenal. And I was just so like, I want to do this again and again and again and again. And, because it's just, I don't know. I feel like sometimes you have to see that a little bit of that mystical to just keep that fire lit, because if you don't see it every once in a while, the whole, it gets easy to kind of get caught back up in the whole world and forget about, that there is this other side of reality that, can just get put in the background if we're not paying attention.
Totally. That describes my late 20s into my early 30s.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you this. So you talked a little bit about parallel lives already. So Mandee and you introduced that topic. And so I have two questions for you on that. But the first one is, so essentially when you explain or describe a parallel life, are you saying that we really live all of our past and future lives at the same time? So there is no such thing as a true past life or a true future life. They're all happening simultaneously, but in their, within our 3D construct, and with time being one of the dimensions here, that we experience it as a past life, but there really is no such thing. It's all just happening at the same time.
That's a really, really good question. And I've been looking at that for a little while now, Adam. So you're getting into some really heavy-hitting questions, in my opinion, and I like it. And what I've come to in my 16 years of professional research is I had to differentiate future. I had to really kind of take a look at what I considered future. So is a future life a life that I am incarnated in 2121 and living on the planet Earth? That is one way to look at future, and that can be happening right now. But as far as future ones that I plan to embark in, they don't have any residual energy because I haven't done them yet. Now there can be potentials and opportunities and what have you. So as far as future lives happening right now, yes, they're the ones you have already lived. Hence we get this idea of past lives. But for your future incarnation choices, that hasn't been developed yet. There's probably some ley lines of what you can jump into, but that's the cool thing about incarnation. It's easy to get jaded and be like, well, we come here all the time, we can come back. No, there is gravity here. It's intense. We focus all of our energy and we're trying to do a project or get some karma taken care of. So what about you, Mandee? What are your views on that?
I was going to say that you've taught me the most about this, and I was going to pass it over to you. But yeah, for me, in my own personal perspectives and experiences, because that's all any of us have, I don't go too far into the future, because I know that I'm meant to do the work here right now to help break karmas and break cycles and teach people how to heal themselves so that they can be freer in the future. And I do believe, in helping to save this planet, and that so many of us incarnated at this time right now to create change here via saving the earth and humanity. I really feel like it's mostly about saving humanity, because Mother Earth and Mama Gaia, she's shaken us off before, and she'll do it again. We're kind of like those pesky little humans. And so I feel like it's very much based in humanity, and I want people to have a much lighter and freer and more beautiful experience in their next incarnations. And I believe very much in the laws of the universe and the laws of manifestation. And I think that the future for me may exist right now, but the things that I'm working on at this moment are what impact that. So for me, it hasn't been revealed too much. Of course, if I do a psychic reading for someone in tarot cards, I'll get a glimpse into that soul's, next year or so, or maybe a couple major things on this lifetime's timeline. But other than that, as far as like globally, I don't see too far into it. But I do know, and I do work hard for the fact that we are co-creating what we get to experience next in this lifetime and others.
It's kind of like a mind-blowing thing to think about, if that if we do have a future life that's happening at this time, that they could be doing a past life regression or past life reading and kind of be like seeing our lives right now in this awareness, in this consciousness. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of weird to think if there's someone, not weird, kind of cool, that, there's someone in the future who's having a past life experience right now saying, oh my gosh, I was on a podcast, on this thing called the SpiritWoke Podcast. And oh my gosh, I remember we were talking about past lives, and it becomes like this, I know that's kind of out there, but it's just interesting to think that
It's awesome.
This current
I think that's dead on.
I think you're right.
Jennie and I are jumping on you. You're creating that moment right now, and you're planting the seeds, and it's absolutely beautiful. And this is how it works. This is how that magic happens. What were you going to say, Jennie?
I was going to say that, when I do my shamanic journeys, I take my client to go visit themselves in a parallel existence. They could be on this planet, another planet, this dimension, another dimension. And we go there to get information and connect with them, to get information. Sometimes there's an energetic trinket that they want to give us and what have you. So there is that. But to speak about the future in visiting this time frame, absolutely, there's absolutely a version of us, especially us old souls, in the future, sitting with a client and regressing with them, or sitting with a healer and regressing with them and saying, oh my gosh, I lived on this planet at a different lifetime and helped be the change that we wish to see. I was here to help shift the dynamic so that we could continue incarnating here on this planet, so that Mother Earth didn't stop us from doing that, or like Mandee said, shake us off. So yes, there are time frame continuums that are running into the future where we are visiting this exact time and watching it happen. One of my most favorite things Jerry Garcia ever said, he said it at Woodstock. He goes, the coolest thing about Woodstock was seeing all the future space travelers, time frame travelers coming to visit us play. I was like, oh my God, Jerry, he took so much acid. And of course he was out there, but he was checking in on that hardcore, being like, it was cool experiencing what we consider, and he knew at that time, a future revolutionary statement. It was cool.
Hey, people who engage with psychedelics see some pretty cool stuff, and it's another way of opening up consciousness and access to other dimensions. It'd be kind of cool to talk to Jerry Garcia and see, like what did you see and what did you experience at Woodstock and your various concerts and engagements. But so let me ask you this last question on parallel lives. Under the guise that when we come back and we reincarnate and we pick the life, like you said, the womb we're born out of, or and the time frame that we're born into, we also pick our purpose, like what we want to learn, what we want to overcome, what karma that we have to deal with in this life. So if that's the case, if that's how it is, how does it work from like a parallel lives perspective? Is it kind of like we let all the dogs out and say, at the same time and say, okay, this fragment of my soul is going to incarnate over here, and you're going to work on this, and this fragment of my soul is going to incarnate over there, and it's going to learn that lesson, and you multiply that out over however many fragments of our soul there is living those parallel lives. And is it just like one soul learning one master soul, parent higher self, learning all of these lessons at the same time?
Excellent questions. This is good. Mandee, do you want to go, or do you want me to start?
I want you to go. I just was commenting. I love that imagery.
Mm-hmm. I think, and this is just my spiritual understanding, and it can be debated and I can be moved in this thought, but this is what I've come up with because I'm a forever asker of questions, and my mind goes in many directions at once. So I've asked these questions to Spirit and to my teacher. And I think what happens is, and this is, I'll use basic terms and you can use your imagery, your mind. That's really the best way to describe it. So there's God, and God allowed parts of himself, we'll call it, to have free will. So that created souls at a touch of ego. And I am talking the smallest touch of ego, just to differentiate personality types or differentiate souls. So I feel like at the beginning of it all, and again, this is all debatable and I'm open to suggestions and other ideas, but at the beginning, God gave us free will and a touch of ego so that we could start creating personality and incarnate to experience and to learn things. So I don't think, and again, up for debate, I don't think in the non-physical we send out 5 fractions of our souls to experience 5 lives at a time. I feel like we do one at a time and engage in that fully or not, however you do it. And then that just adds a chink to the chain. And that's just more another layered experience. So that's the way that I see it happening, is you're in the non-physical and you're in constant bliss, and you say things like, I got a little something up my sleeve. I want to experience what that one karma taught me. I don't know. Let's say you were mean to your brother and you want to go back in and have a brother was mean to you. That's a very basic understanding of it, but it's kind of what triggers the soul's intention to leave bliss, is to learn the curiosity. It's pretty cool. And there's some souls that don't incarnate. There's a lot of us that do, though. So you get a curiosity, you get an intention, you get an idea of something you want to learn. And then you say, I'm opening to learn a lot of different things. These are kind of the things I'm hoping to focus on. And if I do, that's great. And if not, guess what? I'll come back again. So it's all just a roll of the dice and a fun experience. And that's when there's no right or wrong answer. You listen to your soul. What does it want you to do? What is your life purpose? It'll tell you. There's several of them. There's big constructs like art. Well, there's about 100,000 jobs you can get in the art industry. Healer, another 100,000. You want to be an actor, you want to be in theater, there's just so many things you can come into that are big. So we leave it kind of big. I mean, we probably do have a few particulars. Like, for example, one of my particulars is working with my self-confidence and finding an equal partner. So if I hadn't touched those topics this lifetime, it'd be amazing because they come up every day in my life. So I don't know how I would have been able to avoid them. But those were some big ones that weren't going to step out of the way. I had to look at those ones. And then there's other ones like working with family and being a business person and a healer. There's lots of lessons, but there's some big ones, I feel like. Mandee, what do you think?
All that and then some. Yeah. In my experience, what I've come to notice is that no matter what, no matter how out there I get and how many dimensions I get and how much I'm multitasking in this crazy 3D society, I realize that there's always this like drawback to being present and simply experiencing and being present. And I feel like when it comes to the past and parallel lives, that kind of like Jennie said, we have our part of ourself up in the non-physical, and then we do take it one lifetime at a time. And like I said, for me, when I visit past and parallel lives, I feel like that's been a culmination that I've been building on, but also that it's still continuing. But I don't get too far into the future. So it's what makes me feel like I really am. And I do feel this innate sense of like wanting to ascend. And, even though, things are very vertical, or very linear as opposed to vertical, I don't know. I just feel like there's always this opportunity or want or basic human need to want to get a little further and want to get a little better and want to get a little bit more healed and always continue to be a better version of ourselves. And I think that's the end goal so far in my studies and knowledge and channeling thus far, is to just continue to purify our souls and then decide whether or not we want to come back in. And sometimes, even at this time in history, I feel like very pure souls come in and incarnate that maybe haven't spent a ton of time in the physical, but come in just to be the mamas and the nurturers and the teachers and the elders and the ones who care. Like, I feel like there's so many different opportunities to experience the physical. I think we come into this to feel our hearts, to taste things, to experience, sex and love and heartache and music and all these things that when we're in our light bodies and our non-physical, we can't actually experience. So for me, it's just, it's a tough question. And I can see the possibilities of all the parallels existing at the same time and parts of our soul splitting up, because I do feel like part of like my higher self is up there and then I'm here in the non-physical. But I haven't explored too many other parts of that with myself yet. So that's where I'm at on all that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, and agreed. It's more of just a hypothetical in terms of, thinking about having this massive number of parallel lives happening at the same time, right? Like how our soul, each of those lives learning something different, or maybe further in progression or behind in progression, and just it's really cool to think about. Almost like when you ever experience that thing where if there's a mirror in front of you and a mirror behind you, and you look into one of the mirrors and it's just like you see a reflection of the mirror of the reflection of the mirror, and it just keeps going and going and going.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, but what if each of your reflections was doing something different, I don't know.
That's a good analogy. Oh, that's good. I'm going to use that one.
we should create like a flip book of that. Like, that's cool.
Yeah, it's like, but I digress. So let me ask you this question. So, I'm a huge fan of Dr. Michael Newton. I know you are too. And his book, Journey of Souls, was the book that really kind of opened me up to believing in past lives. But one of the other things that he wrote about in that book is life between lives, and you've mentioned that briefly here in this interview. And so, what is a life between life, and are you able to see it and other people's life between lives, and how can you help people with their current experience here in the physical if you are able to see their life between lives?
Well, that's very interesting topic. It does not come up very much in my readings, simply because I feel like one of my main gigs is to find patterns that disrupt the flow. And very often when I look at lives between lives or life in the non-physical, I don't see a lot of disruptance, simply because it's like 99.9999999% heart energy. So I don't always go there simply because I'm kind of a trauma healer. I help people with their problems. I usually, and if we want to, I've never even taken my clients on a shamanic journey to go to lives between lives to get even trinkets or information like I do with the other past lives. So it's interesting. I don't get an opportunity to play with it very often, but I do enjoy looking at it. And from my perspective, and again, everyone's got their own, but from my perspective, we have tasks, things we're interested in doing in the non-physical or lives between lives. I feel kind of silly calling it lives between lives, because I feel like we're in the non-physical like 90, even us old souls who incarnate all the time, we're in the non-physical like 95% of our, so to speak, existence in very little time. Even if you've incarnated hundreds of thousands of times, like all of us on this call, it's a very small fraction of our time is spent in the physical. So I like to call it the non-physical because it is home. It's where we come from and go back to. So I love Dr. Michael Newton. And I haven't read a lot of his stuff, but when I took hypnotherapy courses, we touched on him, and my teacher had been trained by like Dolores Cannon and all this cool stuff. It was awesome. It was a cool lineage. I noticed a bit of ego, of course, in that hierarchy, but nonetheless, I did like his topic of life between lives. But again, I just call it the non-physical in my practice, and say in the non-physical, sometimes you cocoon and help heal souls emotionally when they return from a traumatic life. Sometimes you're a spirit guide. Sometimes you kind of just pop in and help situations. Sometimes you're working with other souls in the non-physical to put energy toward the earth, which there are groups, we'll call that, in the non-physical, sending us high vibratory, heartful, highest learning energy. That's their gig. That's what they like to do. Often they can be past family members or people who've lived on our planet who've put time and effort into this time frame continuum. They're still rooting for us on the other side.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's I love that perspective on it, and it's interesting too because like I know there's a couple of different schools of thought on the other side, quote unquote, the non-physical, and I know there are some people who through their own experience, even people who have experienced near-death experiences where they go to the light and they're met by loved ones, and they have this beautiful experience, and they're taken to their life review. I do a lot of reading about near-death experiences, but then you also have those who experience near-death, or even folks who take plant or sacred medicines like Bufo alvarius, and they experience essentially death through those psychedelics, and they sort of just merge with the light and become one with all, and there is no form any longer. It's just part of this great energy, and it's a beautiful thing too, because people just sort of become fully conscious and separate from form. And so there's so many different perspectives on what that non-physical is, and it's really interesting to hear the different philosophies, even the ones that we create what that is ourselves, right? Like whatever that experience is, it's what we create for it. It's what best fits into our construct.
Beautiful. Our truth. We're constantly creating it. I love it. It's so fun. There's never just one. That's too dogmatic. There's lots of truths, and whatever rings true to you is your truth. It's a fun learning lesson of discernment. Yeah,
so true. Well, hey, I want to be conscious of your time. It's hard to believe that we've already been talking for almost an hour, and it feels like it's gone by in the snap of fingers, right? It's there goes that whole like there's no such thing as time, right? We all know how long an hour
warp.
is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, first of all, before we close out, Jennie, Mandee, is there anything you'd like to plug? Feel free and do so. Share any websites, any social media accounts that you want, and we'll make sure to list those too on your podcast page when it goes live.
Okay. Well, I would love I'll say a couple things, and then Jennie, you fill in. Jennie's really good at this, but I'm excited. If anybody who's listening is in the North Carolina area, if this episode premieres by the next full moon, which is October 13th, I'm hosting Wild Woman Weekend, which is a retreat in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And it's really cool and really fun. And you can find it on my Facebook, Mandee Elam, which is MandeeElam. You can also find it on the Alchemy Sisters, which is Jennie and I's podcast, which is part of our network, Heart Over Ego. And if you want to work with me or with Jennie, you can email us at heartoverego@gmail.com and we'll respond. And we also have a website. The name will be changing in the future, but for now it's alchemyascensionacademy.com. And we would be honored to hold some soul space with you. I offer women's empowerment coaching, oracle readings, and tarot readings, and Jennie offers many services as well. So I'll let her tell you a little bit about her services and about our network.
Thank you, Mandee. And thank you, Adam, for the opportunity. I'm Jennie McDaniel. You can find me at jennie.mcdaniel@gmail or jennie.mcdaniel2 on Facebook. It's Jennie, Jennie, and McDaniel, how it sounds. We are Heart Over Ego Radio. We have 6 shows a week for your listening pleasure. Lots of good nuggets of spiritual information. Check us out, Heart Over Ego Radio. Blog Talk is the platform we use, but you can find us on any major platform for podcast. We're also on YouTube at Heart Over Ego Radio. Again, Adam, I appreciate you for letting us show up. It's always fun chatting with you, and I am always interested in expanding my mind more, and you asked some questions that had me stretching. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate that. And it doesn't always happen. So hopefully we can get together again on either the Alchemy Sisters or SpiritWoke.
Oh, you know this. I look forward to having you both back many times, because there's much more to discuss and philosophize and spiritualize about. And that's the fun part of this journey, isn't it?
Yes, it is, in my opinion.
So.
It's really cool. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time. I can't tell you how appreciative I am for you taking time out of your busy days to be here and join us, and look forward to the next time, and to our guests listening in, or to our audience listening in. We will talk soon. And until then, be well.
For listening to the SpiritWoke Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to check out our website, spiritwoke.com, and connect with the SpiritWoke community on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search SpiritWoke. Join us next time for another edition of the SpiritWoke Podcast. Namaste.